Greetings all and welcome to Daily Pali Reading. Today's passage continues the Buddha's discussion of how to gain companionship with Brahma. This actually will also conclude this short little series. Sayatapi vaseta balava sankadamo apakasireneva chatudisa vinyapeya. Evam evako vaseta. Evang bhavitaya metaya cheto vimutiya yang pamana katang kamang natang tatravasisati natang tatravatittati ayampiko vaseta brahmanang sahabhyataya mago. Just as Vaseta, a strong conch player, might address the four directions with so little difficulty, so too, Vaseta, when the emancipation of the heart is so developed by loving kindness, an action which is performed in the sensuous realm, it will not live there, it does not linger there. This indeed, Vaseta, is the path to companionship with the Brahma gods. Okay, now let's double back through here. This passage isn't syntactically all that difficult, but there is a little tricky section that we'll talk about in a minute. So if we go back here, sayatapi, just as. So the Buddha is now introducing a simile or a comparison. Just as Vaseta, this is the person being addressed, this is the vocative, always post-positive, never the first word in a sentence. Just as Vaseta, balava sankadamo. Now, a sanka is a conch. You have to imagine some big seashell. That's not real familiar to us. I mean, we can kind of picture it. We might think of actually, we could make this a little more free and maybe project the meaning a little better by saying a trumpet. And damo is someone who plays an instrument by blowing through it. So if we said a trumpet player, and then balava, a strong trumpet player. So sankadamo is nominative masculine singular, and balava, an adjective, is also nominative masculine singular. That's from balavant, one bearing strength. Bala is strength or power. And now we look for our verb, vinyapeya. Now this is a present optative third person singular, and it comes from the verb vinyapeti, to address, inform, teach, instruct. And here the meaning is really to address. But the mood of this verb is not indicative, but optative. Optative verbs express possibility, hypothetical situations, wishes. And here the Buddha is talking about an imaginary situation. We're talking about a comparison. And so we can probably understand this verb as just as a conch player might address. What might this strong conch player address? Our object here is actually chatudisa. Disa is a feminine noun, meaning direction. We came across that before when talking about ekang disang paritva viharati. Here we have chatudisa, the four directions. So disa is plural, and it is accusative plural. This is how these long A accusative plurals look. They are also long A. So might address the four directions, apakasireneva. Here we can break these words apart into apa, kasira, and maybe eva or eva. Apa is little, small, trifling, and kasira means with difficulty. Together, apa kasira is with little or with trifling difficulty. And with eva, we could say with so trifling a difficulty, or with very little difficulty. We move on to evam eva ko, so too vaseta. And this is where things get a little more complicated. We have this evang bhavitaya metaya cheto vimuttiya. This is an absolute. You might ask, is it a genitive or a locative absolute? And the answer would be yes, it's one of those. In this case, we don't know, because the oblique cases, apart from the accusative, are all the same for the words in question here. So whether they would be locative or genitive, they look the same. So really, it's take your pick. And if it's true that locative absolutes are a little more common, then maybe it's a locative absolute. We will look at cheto vimuttiya first. Mutti is freedom or emancipation, or I should say vimutti is freedom or emancipation. Cheto is the mind, or in this case, the heart. So emancipation of the heart, and again, this is in an absolute construction, we might say when, the emancipation of the heart. And then we can move to the front of the absolute. Evang bhavitaya is so developed. Bhavita is developed. And then developed by what? Metaya. Now this metaya we will take as an instrumental. Again, its form could be many cases, but here the syntax requires the instrumental. And now we move over to kamang. Kamang is like karma, but it means, of course, action. The verb would be karoti. Then we'll take this relative pronoun yang, an action which, and here is the kind of the difficult word in question, paman akatang. The last part of this compound, katang, is again from the same root, karoti. This is the past participle, katang, done. An action which is done. And then pamana is, we've encountered this in apamanena when describing the cetasa, meta sahagatena, cetasa, boundless when it's apamanena or apamana. Pamana would mean bounded. And we might literally say an action which is done in a limited way, or some action done limitedly. But there's a very helpful note in Walsh's translation of the Digha Nikaya, where he says, and it's note 257, where he says that the commentary takes pamanang katang as equivalent to the sensuous realm, the kama loka. Now, I'm not going to lie, when I first read that, I thought, I'm not seeing the connection here. But here is how that makes sense. We have to understand regular actions, kind of the actions we do every day, as opposed to something like metta, which is seen to be boundless. The range of metta is infinite. We can extend loving kindness to all, everywhere, in any universe that might exist. This is actually one of the Brahma viharas. We didn't really talk about that. One of the divine abodes. The vihara, obviously cognate with viharati, to live, to dwell. The divine abodes, the Brahma abodes. And there are three others. There is compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Karuna, mudita, and upekka. So these are boundless states, and they're actually also called apamanya. So it's also a related word. So I think what's going on here is that actions that are seen as limited are actions that are part of this realm. They're not part of the Brahma realm. They're part of this world in which we live in, the sensuous, the kama loka, where we are mainly motivated by our senses. So keeping that in mind, then we can understand how a limited action might be understood as being an action done in the sensuous realm or in our world. So we might even say an action done in our world, an action which is done in our world, when it's the case that the heart has been emancipated, or when the emancipation of the heart has been so developed by loving kindness. Then we can look at tongue, this, meaning action, tatra vasicity. Now, tatra vasicity is tatra plus avasicity, which is the future of avasity. Avasity is to live at or in, to inhabit, to reside. So this action will not live there. Tatra is there. I think tatra, the there, is referring to cheto. The action will not live in our heart. And I should have mentioned that's natang tatra vasicity. Then we can move on. Natang tatra vatitati. That action does not linger there. And this verb form is not a future tense. This is a present tense verb. Both of these are third person singular. And then we can move on to ayampiko vaseta. Ayampi is ayang and api. Now this P here, this api, is bullet pointing. There are going to be 3 more of these. So we can, in English, we won't need to translate this particular P. This ayang is actually going with mago, but it's going with it, it's joined to it by means of some form of the verb to be. This path. This is the path. Mago is path, way, road. This is the path, mago, masculine nominative singular. Sahabhyataya, to companionship. Now, I think a few videos back I said this backwards. This is a case where we have sahabhyataya, but you actually have to look this up under sahavyata. So this BYA, we actually have to look it up under a VYA, but this VYA sometimes becomes BYA. This is this sahavyata means companionship, and in the dative, it is to companionship. This is the road to companionship, Brahmanan, with the Brahma gods. So this is actually the genitive plural, and this is because there is more than one Brahma god, more than one Brahma type of god. So this is the path to the companionship or to the company of the Brahma gods. So this will conclude not only today's reading, but this little short series from the Tevijja Sutta. I would, of course, encourage you to keep reading in this sutta where the Buddha continues to talk about the other Brahma Viharas, that is, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekkha. Peace, everyone.